My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I'm calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. Now, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage us all to be better consumers of cinema. This week, I'll be reading through a review from the Washington Post titled, "Batman v Superman is so desperate to be taken seriously, it forgets to have fun," written by Ann Hornaday. You can click on the link in the video description below if you'd like to follow along and read it for yourself, and I encourage you to do that so you can see I'm not making it up. This is a real review that we are going to go through in this video. And if Ann Hornaday, the critic that we're going to be reading today, should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible. And I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comment section would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews from Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were unfortunately changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse. Now, before I get into Ann's thoughts, I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, Ann's a professional critic for a major news outlet. What do you have to add to that, Rebecca? Who cares what you have to think? Why should I care about what you're going to say in this live stream? And to those people, I say fair criticism, fair question. I would probably ask the same if I were the viewer as well. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background on me, and then we'll come back and we'll start getting through the review. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, so before we get started here, I just wanted to acknowledge my green screen is not as good this week. StreamYard, which is the platform I use to live stream to YouTube, has changed their green screen function, so it's more like Zoom now, which is, for people who don't have green screens, Zoom is a better thing. But for people who do have green screens, the Zoom functionality is not as great. So I'm going to have to align my lights and restructure my lighting situation. So I just wanted to put that out there in case people are watching and are like, ugh, your green screen sucks. Yeah, I need to fix it. So that's a new development from this week. So haven't had time to play around with it. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there before we get started because it was bugging me, most importantly. All right, so I'm going to try to get over myself and we'll get into this review. So this is a review from Ann Hornaday of the Washington Post. So I usually like to start these by looking at the title or the headline, if you will. So this one says, Batman v Superman is so desperate to be taken seriously, it forgets to have fun. I have two questions in relation to this title of this review. The first one is, what's wrong with a film wanting to be taken seriously? I know lots of films that do that, and a lot of them win Oscars and get accolades from critics and moviegoers and other directors. I don't understand why it's such a bad thing to be taken seriously. So that's a strange thing to point out in the title, just first off. My second question to this is, why does a dramatic film need to be fun? Because I wouldn't put Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice in the comedy category. So I don't understand why it needs to be fun. I would actually put it Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice kind of varies where I would probably put it. I would probably start putting it in like a dramatic category if you were going to classify the genre or the tone of the film. It'd probably be genre. You could maybe do political thriller. I wouldn't say action adventure really. When I think of action adventure, I think of like Robin Hood. But probably like political thriller, political intrigue, something like that. But I wouldn't put it in a like a fun family adventure or a comedy or something like that. So I don't understand the need to put it in a fun category. So I think that's very strange altogether. So right off the bat, the title seems to make it seem like it's supposed to be this lighthearted, jaunty, fun time when the film itself doesn't set out to be that. So it's keep this in mind to when we get to the end of the live stream. just that there's something at the end of the live stream I want to let everyone know about. And so just keep this in mind that this reviewer is putting something on the film that the film didn't want put out about itself. So just just keep that in mind. We'll get there at the end. All right, so getting into the actual review itself, it says a quote: Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice begins with and ends with a funeral, which is fitting for a movie that plays like one long dirge. So, if you read this sentence without any context of what is happening in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, you would think this is a negative and harsh critique. But when you actually watch the film and see why it begins and ends with a funeral, I would argue that it's brilliantly done. Both of those funerals show a change in Bruce Wayne into the hero that he can be. The funeral at the beginning is the birth of a hero into Batman, and at the one at the end of the film is the death of Superman, the death of a hero. So you have the birth of a hero at the beginning and the death of a hero, and then you also have a rebirth of a hero in Bruce Wayne as Batman, if you want to look at it that way. So the idea that Batman v Superman begins and ends with a funeral and plays like one long dirge or dirge, uh, that's what the film is. That's what the story is. That's what it wants to be. So it's very strange to me that that seems like a negative and harsh critique if you didn't actually watch the film. That's what the film is. You're just describing the film. And then if you're wondering what a dirge is, it is defined as a funeral hymn or lament. It can also be defined as a slow, solemn, and mournful piece of music. So perhaps Anne is referring to BVS as a dirge in that it is slow and solemn. But isn't the film being a dirge kind of like the point of the story? Isn't it all leading to the death of Superman? What if that is the actual intention from the director and screenwriter? Isn't that what we're supposed to take away from that? I mean, that's what I think. So I don't understand why that's a bad thing if that's the actual intention from the filmmakers themselves. I also I know that Anne hopes that she can showcase her disgust for Batman v Superman right here in the intro, but really to me she's just reinforcing that the film did what it needed to do in terms of storytelling and tone. She makes it seem like it's a really negative and terrible thing, but if you actually watch the film and actually try to break it down and analyze it for what it is and what it wants to be, it's just doing its job. All right, so continuing on, quote, dreary, overproduced, and underbaked. I think this is maybe the second review. I haven't really been keeping tally, but I think this is the second one who's used the word overproduced. Interesting. Dreary, overproduced, and underbaked. Ooh, underbaked. That's a new one. This nominal showdown between two of comicdom's most mythic superheroes serves as a grim reminder of just how bad Man of Steel really was. That 2013 movie introduced British actor Henry Cavill as Superman in a tea-colored miasma of dutiful action sequences and sadistically over-the-top violence, unquote. Oh, and is bringing the synonyms that she got from the thesaurus, just bringing them in here. The miasma, the dutiful action sequences. Love it. Love it. Teaching me words. I love it. So, all right. So, I have a couple of questions and some thoughts about this paragraph. How is BVS dreary, overproduced, and underbaked? I hope Anne's going to explain those descriptions and give us more detail on her point of view here in this paragraph. I'm not counting on it. She doesn't do it here in the paragraph when they're mentioned. I would have loved some explanation of why she thinks that it's dreary, overproduced, and underbaked. I'd be interested in hearing that side of it and hearing that argument, but we don't get an explanation thus far. And we won't go through Ann Hornaday's Man of Steel review here just due to time. But if you'd like to read it, I've linked it in the video description below. It doesn't seem like she likes it. So just go into it with that knowledge. It's also her use of miasma here is very interesting to me because that word is defined as there's a couple of definitions that I noted. The first one is a vaporous exhalation formerly believed to cause disease. Okay. The second one is an influence or atmosphere that tends to deplete or corrupt. The third one is noxious exhalations from putrescent organic matter, poisonous effluvia, or germs polluting the atmosphere. And then the last one I could find as a definition for miasma is a dangerous, foreboding, or death like influence or atmosphere. So, tea colored miasma. So, take that as you will. I might have to cough for a second. I'm going to mute my mic. All right, I'm going to try to carry on. I might be getting like a fit of coughs. So, I'm not sick or anything. It's just all of a sudden I've gotten some kind of crazy need to need to cough. All right, maybe it's maybe this is the miasma that's happening to me as we do this review. All right, so continuing on, Anne mentions the sadistically over the top violence in Man of Steel. uh what did she expect? It's Kryptonians fighting Kryptonians, multiple Kryptonians fighting another Kryptonian. Is it not supposed to be over the top? Is it not supposed to be violent? I don't understand what the expectation is with that. Especially when you go back and watch some of the DC animated stuff where, Superman and Shazam are throwing each other through buildings on a kids show. Like, what did you expect? I'm so curious about these people. What did they expect going in? Anyway, so that's just all very interesting to me. All right, so continuing on, she writes, quote, director Zack Snyder returns to those questionable core values in a film that replaces genuine intrigue and suspense with a series of confounding red herrings, tossing out solemn observations about men, gods, martyrs, and saviors, while invoking such hot button issues as terrorism, drones, and immigration. Batman v Superman is so desperate for the audience to take it seriously that it forgets to have any fun at all. Rather than escapism and sensory exhilaration. Sorry. I was reading all kinds of stuff earlier, and exhilaration was tough to get out. Viewers get down in the mire with protagonists who grimace, scowl, and wince their way through heroics with the joyless determination of shift workers making the donuts, unquote. Okay, she mentions questionable core values. Like what? What are those questionable core values? And does not explain. So I have no idea what she's talking about. Then she also says confounding red herrings. Like what? I wish Anne gave me a little more explanation on this because I've seen the movie a gazillion times now. I've stopped counting. But I'm not exactly sure what she's referring to here. So I wish she could explain that. Granted, I understand that like these reviews come out not too long after the film is released, and they probably don't want to spoil things. But when you just put that out there and don't explain yourself, what the heck? I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean. You could write that about any film. Oh, there's confounding red herrings and questionable things in this film. But you never explain it. It's bizarre to me. It also seems like Anne actually recognized here in this paragraph that there was something going on in the writing about men, gods, martyrs, and saviors, and even recognizes the issues of terrorism, drones, and immigration. But for some reason, doesn't seem interested in exploring any of that in this review. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But if there are really juicy things in a film or even a TV show, I talk about TV a lot. But if it has themes and thematic elements that tie together and it's talking about big things like men versus God and, immigration issues or whatever, like it would be really interesting as a writer for me. Like if I was writing about it, that would that would interest me to write about it. She seems completely uninterested in writing about that here in this review, and I find that really interesting because there's a mention of that, but there's no further exploration of that. because that would take some effort. That would take just too much of her time, I think, to actually dig into thematic elements of a film in a film review. All right, or a film critique. Still not sure about the answer to my question that I'm still trying to determine an answer for. Is there a difference between a film critic and a film reviewer? I don't know. Let me know in the comments or the live chat. I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. Okay, and she also mentions escapism. Why does Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice need to be escapism? Why? Because it's superheroes? Because it has people in capes? Because they're superpower beings? Why? Why does it have to be escapism? And what if it is escapism for me? Who are you to say it's not escapism just because it's serious and has serious things to say about man versus God? That's so I don't understand that. And then also, when does Batman v Superman not lead to sensory exhilaration? When? She doesn't mention anything. She doesn't give me details. I'm just curious. I'm just asking questions here. And also, why can't a protagonist grimace, scowl, and wince? Who says that's not okay to do as a protagonist? Why can't you? If you're, I mean, that would make somebody a character with many layers. Why can't they? Okay, we're going to continue on reading Anne's thoughts here. Quote, Batman v Superman begins where Man of Steel left off. You know, Man of Steel, that film she clearly did not like. That is with Superman laying waste to the futuristic city of Metropolis. I'm sorry, what? In order to save it. Appalled millionaire orphan Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck, worries that the new neighborhood vigilante is accountable to no one. Unlike Bruce, who is at least has to answer to his lifelong factotum, Alfred, a drawly amusing Jeremy Irons, unquote. The futuristic city of Metropolis. Now, I understand in the comics and some of the animated stuff, that's usually kind of the idea that Metropolis is kind of like the Man of Steel, like it's the city of tomorrow, that kind of thing. But what in these films makes it a futuristic city of Metropolis? That is never something that's been established, that it has the idea that they want to be this futuristic city. So I'm just confused about that. I don't know when that was ever described. Metropolis was ever described as such. I don't know where she's getting that. And then she also describes Bruce Wayne as a millionaire. Isn't Bruce Wayne typically a billionaire? That seems to shortchange Bruce Wayne quite a bit. I mean, quite a bit. I don't know if we have confirmation of Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and the financial status of him in the DCEU, but I know that the DCEU wiki describes him as a billionaire. So I'm just saying, like, don't make him less rich than he really is. That's all I'm saying. Like, give him that money that he's deserved. So it's strange that she would refer to Bruce Wayne as a millionaire. Anne also insists that BVS doesn't have any fun, but then acknowledges that Alfred is amusing. So I find that quite delightful in its contradictory nature. So I'm going to stop right here and just see if there is anything in the chat that people wanted to talk about. Let's see. Dennis asked the question, how can a movie be overproduced? I'm guessing they're referring to the budget. BVS had a big budget, but a lot of films have big budgets. A lot of them have a lot of money thrown at them. And I think they used all of the money that they had in all the right ways. They made it look like a stellar looking film, and I don't think they went over budget. They worked with I don't think so. They worked within the budget they were given. And so I don't know that it's overproduced in the budget realm. Maybe overproduced in some other area, like maybe it used too much CGI or something. I don't know. Again, she doesn't explain what that means. So we're guessing at what she means, which is unfortunate. I would rather actually hear Anne's thoughts than just guess at them. Um, let's see. Bringing back the Mohawk says it's billionaire Vicky. Millionaires or so last year. Let's see. Yeah, so I think it's just unfortunate that in some of these reviews they'll throw out words and descriptions and then never follow up what that means. And that frustrates me as somebody who likes to review films and TV shows and who likes to analyze things. That if you don't describe and like go into detail about what you're talking about, I have no idea. And it's so frustrating to read these professional critical reviews and they do this. It's the most bizarre thing. All right, let's continue to go on here. So Anne writes, quote, the point of Superman v. Batman, of course, is to get these two brooding saviors of humanity to the ultimate showdown and maybe launch an Avengers worthy multiverse in the bargain. Snyder, with the dubious help of screenwriters Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer, does all he can to put off that final confrontation, keeping Bruce and Clark Kent on their separate paths, only to be brought together by the unhinged entrepreneur Lex Luthor, portrayed by Jesse Eisenberg in a jittery, hysterically pitched performance that resembles a gnat impersonating Heath Ledger, unquote. Okay, first of all, it's Batman v Superman, not Superman v Batman. And for a reason, it's Batman is first because he's taking up the case against Superman. It's kind of a lot of people like to liken it to a legal case. Batman is the one with the problem with Superman, so he's the one taking it up with Superman. So he's the one who's bringing the case against Superman. And yeah, Superman has issues with Batman's methods as well, but it's Batman who has really the big beef with Superman in the film and goes to great lengths to try to stop him, even to the point of wanting to murder him. So I think to switch it around like that is honestly pretty unprofessional in my opinion, because that's one, not analyzing the film correctly because you've totally dismissed what the title is actually telling you and what the story is actually telling you. And then it's just being disrespectful because that's not the title of the film. So I find that even that just little bit pretty unprofessional, in my opinion. And also wants BVS to be fun, but takes issue with Warner Brothers hoping to launch its own cinematic universe. I'm not sure I understand that. She wants it to be like the MCU, but she doesn't want them to have what the MCU has. I don't understand that. Okay, so this is something that I find very perplexing. So she says that Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor resembles Heath Ledger, or rather resembles a gnat impersonating Heath Ledger. So basically she's comparing Jesse Eisenberg's Lex as trying to be Heath Ledger's Joker. In what way? I would love an explanation to this. I don't think they're alike at all. I would love her to explain this to me. Why are they alike? Why are they alike? Because in fact, isn't it actually the opposite situation between these two characters? Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor has an elaborate plan. Especially now, at the time she wrote this, she had not seen the Ultimate Edition, which makes his plan even more elaborate. But even in the theatrical version of the film, he has a big plan that he's manipulating Batman, he's manipulating Superman, he's playing the government. He has a huge plan that he's making happen through step-by-step things, a process across all of the scenes of the film. Throughout the film, he's making this plan come to fruition by the end of it. And then Lex even has a backup plan with Doomsday if Batman doesn't kill Superman. So he's got plan after plan after plan after plan. Conversely, Heath Ledger's Joker asks Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, do I really look like a guy with a plan? That is his actual dialogue in the film. His Joker actually makes fun of the idea that it's all part of the plan. He's all about introducing a little bit of anarchy. He's an agent of chaos. And he claims that he's not a schemer. He's very adamant about not being a schemer. And he just does things. He doesn't have a plan. He just does things. Heath Ledger's Joker actually thinks that trying to control things is pathetic. So I think it's weird that a film critic would compare these two characters when they are nothing alike and nothing alike. Joker would actually make fun of Lex Luthor for having plans. And Lex Luthor would think the Joker was dumb for not having them. Like they're not alike in any way. So I just think it's strange that she would make that comparison when those characters are nothing alike. All right, so continuing on, she writes, quote, Eisenberg is one of the few weak links in the cast of Batman v Superman, which actually features some terrific performances. Affleck has the square jaw and resolute demeanor to convincingly channel Bruce, who once he becomes Batman acquires an adenoidal speaking voice and a pair of Frankensteinian shoes that, if camera placement is any indication, Snyder has a fetish. Well, this is a tough word to say. Fetishistic, fetishistic. Sorry, I have a real hard time with that word. Fascination. He basically has a fetish, is what it's trying to say. Fascination with. As Superman, Cavill once again wears that vaguely put off expression of someone who's just ingested something distasteful. He's much more appealing as Clark Kent for a Warby Parker age, doting on Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, and wondering why his valiant efforts to save the world are seen by some as the suspect doings of an alien arriviste. I'm trying to read that en français. It looks like French. Arriviste. Unquote. All right. So Anne is very sophisticated in her writing. She wants you to know that. She's using a lot of big words, a lot of words that not a lot of people use, words that Rebecca had to look up because she didn't understand them and didn't know what they meant. So Anne is just, I mean, just really using the big words. So I'm honestly, I'm not even being sarcastic. I'm impressed. Like, I'm impressed. Anne taught me some things with these words here in this review. So I appreciate that Anne mentions that there are some really terrific in her review. She wrote the word terrific performances in BVS, and I agree. I think there's so many great performances throughout the film, and I'm glad that she acknowledged that. I do find it strange, though, that Anne would describe Batfleck's voice as adenoidal, when his version is actually the voice he uses is more robotic or mechanical or modulated. When I think of adenoidal, I think of talking through the throat and, doing all this stuff with the voice, because you know who that sounds like? Christian Bale's Batman. I would describe, if it was me, I'm not writing this review, but I would associate that more with Christian Bale's Batman. I can't even do it. But so to use adenoidal here, I think is strange, because I don't think she's quite describing Batfleck's voice as Batman correctly, because my personal opinion, Batfleck's voice as Batman is much cooler and much more effective in the fact that he's not giving himself away, because his voice is modulated, so you wouldn't know that was Bruce Wayne necessarily. Maybe if you analyzed it, but but I think he makes his voice different enough as Batman that you wouldn't necessarily make that connection right away. But with like Christian Bale's Batman, like, he's the same guy but talking like this. I mean, it's anyway. I just thought it was strange that she described his Batman voice like that. Then she goes on to describe Batfleck's armored boots as Frankensteinian shoes, which to me shows that she has no knowledge of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, which was the comic book graphic novel which inspired that costume. So the reason that the Ben Affleck's Batman has those boots is because it's taken directly from the source material. And also, I have a question about Anne suggesting, and this is if I'm reading it correctly, that Zack Snyder has a shoe fetish. Is that what everybody else is picking up? That's interesting to me, because I'm guessing that, like me, she picked up on the recurring visual motif of the camera showing the feet of characters in Batman v Superman. I like to think that it's the film's way of metaphorically putting us in their shoes, So I think it's a cool motif, and I actually talk about this very thing in my video on the cinematography of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. If you haven't seen that, it's kind of long, but maybe it's worth it if you like to hear someone talk and jibber jabber about that. I do have that video linked in the video description below if you do want to check that out. But I do have a section on the feet motif there. So it's interesting that she did pick that up, but she offers no explanation of why Zack Snyder would have those recurring shots throughout the film. And I think it's interesting that she never tries to figure that out. I always think about this when I think about critics and what I aspire to be as a critic personally. There's a video of I believe it was Roger Ebert. If I've gotten it wrong, I'll have to, own up to it. But I want to say it was him, and he was with um, Alfred Hitchcock. I want to say it was Ebert, but he was interviewing Alfred Hitchcock, and he asked a question, and I forget which film it was. And I should know because I'm a big Hitchcock film, but I can't think of what the film was that he was asking him questions about. But he mentioned a recurring motif of stairs, and he asked Alfred Hitchcock about his use of stairs and what it meant. And I always think about that question, that interview, because it's not just a film critic saying, "Oh, Alfred Hitchcock and his fetish about stairs." It was a critic who said, "You did this, and you must have had a purpose and a meaning behind it. Can you help me understand what that is? Help me to connect those dots." And I just always think like that's what a critic should be doing. A critic shouldn't just be saying, "Ugh, I didn't like that." A critic should instead be saying, "Well, what did you mean by that? Why did you do that? I'm curious to know what the meaning behind that was." There's got to be meaning in there. So, and that's a whole other conversation because I could talk all day about C.S. Lewis and his theories about art criticism and finding meaning in a story. There's a lot to talk about there, and maybe we'll get to that at some point in these discussions. But meaning, I think, in storytelling is very important. Is I guess what it boils down to saying. But I always think about that interview because and if I find it, I'll link it in the video description after I end the live stream. But this is a really good example. It's like, oh, the Zack Snyder and his shoe fetish, whatever. Instead, she should have been like, well, why does he keep showing the feet? That's a choice he's making. Why does he do that? There's obviously got to be some reason that he's doing that. So I just think that that's like a perfect example to me of showing someone who's just pretending to, and I hate to say this. I don't want to say this, but it's just an example of somebody, to me anyway. It comes across like somebody who's just sort of pretending to be a film critic using a lot of big fancy words, but is not actually all that interested in actually understanding the film. And I hope that makes sense. And I hope that wasn't very condescending and or mean spirited. I'm trying not to be, but that's the way it comes across to me when I read something like that, where somebody's not even trying to explore why the filmmaker is doing what he or she is doing. You may not like what they're doing. You can understand it and still say, I didn't like it. I get what he's doing, but I didn't like it. Like, that's fair. I get that. But to not even even attempt to understand what a filmmaker is doing is something that I just don't understand. So that's my long answer about that. So that's just something that I found interesting about that paragraph. Also, if you are curious about the definition of a reviste, which I assume again is French, so I'm trying to say it as such en français. The definition is a person who has recently attained high position or great power, but not general acceptance or respect. And you could also maybe say an upstart. And there's another definition that says one that is a new and uncertain arrival, such as in a social position or artistic endeavor. So actually, I think that word is actually very appropriate for the description that she used there in that paragraph. So I think that's a good use of that word and taught me something new. So I appreciate that, Anne. All right, so continuing on, quote, suffused with paranoia and hostility, Batman v Superman engages in the kind of po-faced hypermasculinity that can be seen as an apologia for privilege at its most unexamined and disarming. Sure, these guys swagger through the streets laying waste to all that's in their path, but their psychic burdens are unimaginable. They hurt. Italicized hurt. And man, do they love their mothers. And that's in parentheses. All right, so po-faced. So what's the definition of po-faced? Because I know we all use po-faced in our regular just vernacular. I know we all do. Po-faced means having an assumed solemn, serious, or earnest expression or manner, piously or hypocritically solemn. So here is another example of why she's trying to assert that it's not okay for these heroes to be serious or solemn. I still don't understand why it's not okay. There's still no explanation provided in the review for why that's not okay. But that seems to be something that Anne is very concerned about. Uh, I would also be curious to know if Anne would describe any of the MCU characters as hyper masculine. What's her definition for that? Is it just because they fight? Is it because they use gravelly voices? I'm I don't know. I'm curious. I don't understand what she means by that, and I'm curious if she would describe any of the other characters who fight in the MCU as hyper masculine. Because they do it all the time. So I'm I'd just be curious as to why if she doesn't, why doesn't she apply hyper masculine to the MCU characters as well? I'd just be curious about that. And it's interesting. Speaking of the hypermasculinity, she complains about hypermasculinity, but then writes as if it's a negative thing for Batman and Superman to hurt, to be emotionally hurt, and to love their mothers. And that seems contradictory to me. You don't want these men to be hyper masculine, but then you also make fun of them for having their feelings wrecked or hurt or being emotional, and you also make fun of them because they love their mothers. So what is it? What do you want them to be? I don't understand the contradiction there. All right, continuing on. Quote, as a wish fulfillment fantasy of potency and an unassailable moral certainty, Snyder's vision is understandable, if not particularly distinguished or convincing. Chase scenes, explosions, beatdowns, shootouts, and the final brutalizing mano a mano all look cobbled together from generic elements of other movies, crashing into a rock'em sock'em rubble of glass, steel, rain, and polystyrene concrete. And she puts in parentheses, Hans Zimmer's bombastically self-important score is just as derivative. And I'm pretty sure bombastically and self-important are kind of redundant. Yeah, so we'll get there. I'm going to talk about the definition of the word bombastic. But yeah, bombastically self-important is pretty redundant. Score is just as derivative in this case of all his other bombastically self-important scores. Ooh, I gotta stop. This is not the end of the paragraph, but I didn't write this down in my notes. But reading it out loud is another thing. When you read it out loud, I can't believe that she said that about Hans Zimmer. I just can't believe it. Hans Zimmer is one of the great film composers of all time. Like, I know people rank John Williams up at the top. I would put Hans Zimmer above John Williams, hands down. I'm speechless. I can't believe she said that about him. I can't even believe it. Okay, moving on. We're gonna continue on. Quote. An early callback to the fall of the World Trade Center on 9/11 manages to be both painfully timely and shamelessly opportunistic. So, all right, I guess this is another thing that I didn't make note of in my notes, but now I'm after reading out loud, I'm a little confused by it. So she writes an early callback to the fall of the World Trade Center. I mean, there is some 9/11 imagery in both Man of Steel and at the beginning of BBS with the fight between Superman and Zod, but the World Trade Center didn't actually fall in the film. Like, there's no callback to that actually happening. It's just the imagery that we associate with 9/11. So that's a really weirdly worded sentence. And how is it shamelessly opportunistic? Painfully timely and shamelessly opportunistic in 2016? what does that even mean? If somebody can understand that sentence for me, please let me know, because I after reading it again, I'm just like, what does that mean? Okay, so to try to break down some of the things that I understood about that paragraph, so isn't unassailable moral certainty the whole point in Batman v Superman? Bruce's morality is in doubt, and Alfred calls him on it. Superman questions his purpose. Lex Luthor thinks his view of morality is the right one, even though he has clearly become an insane person. Morality in the film is something all the characters deal with, and for me, that's one of the things that make it a compelling story. I think the idea of being able to dissect that and look at it from each character's perspective, and kind of look at the moral certainty that they all face, whether it be something that they're sure about, like Lex Luthor, he is very certain about his take on morality. But Batman and Superman, both they kind of waver in the film, whether it's Superman doubting himself and then at the end being sure of himself, and that he wants to save his world and then does it, and Bruce kind of taking that corner after the Martha moment. So I think the exploration of morality in the film is actually one of the best parts about it. So I think it's, again, this is like a strange thing for me to read a review from a professional critic from the Washington Post who doesn't seem interested in exploring the morality tale that's happening here with these characters. This is juicy stuff we're talking about in this story. And she has no interest in exploring any of these things from a thematic point of view. My mind is blown. Okay, so and also, as we've previously established, especially in the title, that BVS it's not any fun. But she also mentions chase scenes, explosions, beat downs, shootouts, and big mano a mano fights. If those aren't fun for her to watch, I wonder what is. It, is it too hyper masculine for her? I don't know. But I mean, when most people think about action films and thrillers, they think about the chase scenes and the action scenes and the things that are happening. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I think some of that is really fun to watch. I like the Batmobile chase sequence that ends with Superman kicking the Batmobile away with his just barely bumping it. I really like the warehouse, the warehouse, the Martha rescue, the warehouse rescue. That's awesome. So I think that all of that is really fun to watch. But I'm guessing, unfortunately, for Anne, she didn't find that interesting or fun. So I'm sad for her that she didn't think the the Martha rescue was really fun, because boy, is it fun to watch. Okay, so this is my fault. I should be counting how many times a review mentions Hans Zimmer's score and describes it as bombastic. I should have had a tally, and it's on me, you guys. I'm very sorry I dropped the ball on that. Maybe I can go back through my notes and type in my Google Docs, the word bombastic, and see how many times it shows up. So maybe that'll be something that we look at as we go through these reviews from Rotten Tomatoes, how many times people use the word bombastic in relation to Hans Zimmer's score for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Let's maybe see if we could track it. If y'all will help me with that, I would be really appreciative, because some of the stuff I'm trying to keep a track of, but sometimes even for me it gets a little too hard. So okay, let's look at the word bombastic now, because sometimes when I think about the word bombastic, I think of one thing, and then I look it up in the dictionary and it might be something else. So here are a few definitions of the word bombastic: pretentious, exaggerated importance by artificial or empty means; pompous, grandiose, overpowering. So I'm just curious, for people watching, do you think that Hans Zimmer's score for Batman v Superman is bombastic? I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. And I'm curious, more importantly, in reading this review, why does Anne think the word bombastic applies to Hans Zimmer's score for this? That she doesn't explain it. I have no idea why. I'm having to guess. But I'm guessing the overpowering definition of bombastic is maybe the word she's referring to. And if so, would she be connecting the overpowering nature of the score to Batfleck's musical motif with the duh, 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 that kind of overpowering sound, especially at the beginning of the film? or, would she be connecting it to the nightmare sequence and some of the music that scores that bit of the film? And if so, if she's thinking about those two things, because again, we don't know, so we're having to guess. But if she is referencing those kind of those two main things that make it overpowering, because that's all I can think of. Don't the musical choices in the film fit those two aspects? Batfleck is all about revenge and brutality, and his musical theme and motif express that through the music. And a post-apocalyptic world ruled by Darkseid should be a little weird. It should be a little scary. It should be a little chaotic. So I think that actually fits the tone and the story that they're going with. So I don't know. I don't know why these film critics say it's bombastic. There are lots of moments in the film that are quiet and reverential. I'm thinking about when Superman dies and there's like a chorus that sings over him. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The funeral scene is beautifully scored. So you would think by reading these reviews that like the whole film score is big and blah, blah, blah. It's not. It's not. It's various. It varies throughout the scenes. It differs based on the tone and the character that are appearing in the scenes. And so I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions about the use of the word bombastic. All right, let's continue on. Anne writes, quote, at a punishing 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours. I want to emphasize that. It's all very turgid and unsmilingly sober. The direct opposite of the sprightly, witty, visually vibrant Avengers movies. But there are bright spots. Holly Hunter brings flinty brio to her role as as a U.S. senator skeptical of Superman's motives. Is she skeptical, or is she just like telling it like it is? I'm going to keep going. And Gal Gadot exudes both mystery and muscle as Wonder Woman, who shows up way too late to do way too little. The same, she's actually all throughout the film, but I guess you're talking about Wonder Woman at the very end. Okay, I mean, that's fair. The same could be said for Diane Lane here, cast as Clark's Midwestern mom, even though she has enough glamour and moxie to embody a superhero in her own right, unquote. You know what? I agree with that. I think Martha Kent is a superhero of her own. I appreciate that. The thoughts about the ladies here. Okay, punishing 2.5 hours. You guys, can you believe a film is 2.5 hours? I am clutching my pearls right now. A 2.5 hour film. What are we gonna do with it? It's so long. This is the only film in the history of cinema that's 2.5 hours. Oh my gosh, how could they make a film so long? I don't know what to do with myself. Just how could you just sit through a punishing 2.5 hour long film? Well, I'm sure we all could answer that because most films now run long these days. I still don't understand why these critics think that 2.5 hours is this insane time frame, this insane runtime for a film. Why do these critics think it's so crazy? And I'm going to back this point up with some examples about some other films with some other runtimes. So we're going to take a look at these together. I've got a few links that I've brought with me, and I've included them in the video description below so that you can go and take a look at them yourself if you would like to. And I encourage you to do the same. Let's see. All right, so let me get this pulled up here so that we can look at all these lists together. I want to make sure this is correct. And I might change my, let's see. Do I want to go full screen? Let's see how I want to make this layout happen. What's better? This is a little bigger, so maybe that'll help y'all see. And maybe I can also, can I go? I don't want to go full screen. I don't think. All right, so we're going to take a look at this first link that I found. This is, I think this is a user-generated list on IMDb. And this is a list of movies over 2 hours long. So let's just take a look at some of these titles, shall we? All right. Pulp Fiction, A Clockwork Orange, The Shawshank Redemption, Raging Bull, Fight Club, Catch Me If You Can, Forrest Gump, Casino, Let's see. The People versus Larry Flint, Rain Man, Zodiac, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Jerry Maguire, True Lies, Face Off, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Castaway, The Matrix, The Game, Boogie Nights, Ray, Captain Phillips, Serpico, The Deer Hunter, The Negotiator, The Pianist, Eyes Wide Shut. That's a pretty stellar list of films that most people, I think, would be like, hey, this is some good films. That's over 2 hours long. Oh, that's crazy. That's such a long runtime for those films. Oh my gosh, why would you sit down and watch them? They're so long. Oh no, what are we gonna do? All right, so let's look at another list. And this is a list, also a user generated. I appreciate these IMDb users who are generating these lists for us. I appreciate that. All right, so this is just a list titled Really Long Movies, which I appreciate. This is a list of movies that are 2 hours and 40 minutes or longer. So let's look at this list and just see if they're just like crappy films that nobody likes and nobody would sit through. All right, so these films are The Dark Knight Rises, Pirates of the Caribbean, At World's End, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, The Godfather Part 2, The Godfather Part 3, Scarface, King Kong, Alexander, The Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur, come on, Seven Samurai, Titanic won, I don't even know how many Academy Awards, Braveheart, Saving Private Ryan, The Thin Red Line, Schindler's List, Gandhi, The Last Emperor, The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, Australia, Titus. There's a movie that doesn't have a title. And I think those are kind of the big ones on that list. Oh my gosh, who would watch those films? They're too long. What a punishing 2 hours and 40 minutes or longer for those movies. Why would anybody watch those? Oh my gosh, so long. All right, so let's look at another list. I'm loving these lists. Let's look at them together. All right, so this next list that we're going to look at is, I believe, another user-generated list from IMDb. This is best films over 3 hours long. Let's see if anybody would watch these films. I'm very curious because, if it's a long film, that means it's bad, right? That's the correlation here we're getting in these top critic reviews, reviews of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The theory, the the argument is, because it's 2.5 hours, it's a terrible movie. Okay. So we've established the argument. Let's take a look at this list. All right. So these are films that are over 3 hours long. The Godfather Part 2, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Schindler's List, Seven Samurai, Magnolia, The Green Mile. Oh, The Green Mile is so good. Once Upon a Time in America, Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia. Let's see, Barry Lyndon, The Deer Hunter, JFK, Ben-Hur, The Wolf of Wall Street, Dr. Zhivago, Gandhi, Judgment at Nuremberg, Titanic, Dances with Wolves, The Hateful Eight, Spartacus, King Kong, The Ten Commandments. It's a mad, 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 mad world. Everybody loves It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Come on, what a great film. Let's see any other big names. This is Hamlet. This is the one directed by Kenneth Branagh, starring Kate Winslet. Give it up. The Right Stuff, Nixon. Some big names on that list. Films over 3 hours long. I'm sure nobody watched those films. They must be terrible because they're over 3 hours long. I mean, come on. You know what? I'm sure this is beating beating a dead horse by this time. But let's look at another list. Maybe we're looking at too many user generated lists. Let's look at another list, shall we? I've got lists for days. I'm loving these lists. All right. So this is from BuzzFeed. All right, the 15 super long movies with the biggest box office debuts. So remember, the argument is the film is super long means it's bad. Well, these are super long movies. They were huge hits. All right, so it made a lot of money. Okay, Saving Private Ryan, 2 hours 50 minutes. American Gangster, 2 hours 40 minutes. Troy, 2 hours 43 minutes. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, 2 hours 58 minutes. King Kong, 3 hours 7 minutes. Peter Jackson King Kong is just so good. Watchmen, 2 hours, 43 minutes. Pearl Harbor, 3 hours and 3 minutes. Can you believe Pearl Harbor is 3 hours and 3 minutes long? I can't. The Lord of the Rings, the two towers, 2 hours, 59 minutes. The Lord of the Rings, the Return of the, forget all the titles here. The Return of the King, that's what I thought. 3 hours and 20 minutes, and you feel every minute of that film. The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, 2 hours and 41 minutes, one of the shorter films in that franchise. Avatar, 2 hours and 40 minutes. The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, 2 hours, 46 minutes. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. When I went to see this in a midnight showing, a guy fell asleep in the theater, 2 hours, 41 minutes. Pirates of the Caribbean, At World's End, 2 hours, 48 minutes. The Dark Knight Rises, one of my favorite Batman films, 2 hours and 45 minutes. The huge big hits, all of them. Let's see. Let's continue on. I have, let's see. I have one other list that I want to indulge us in because I'm having so much fun with these lists. I'm having such a good time. All right, so let's look at one more list just to kind of round it out. We're probably going to see some of the same films pop up in this final list that we're going to take a look at. Okay, so this is the best movies that are super long. I love these titles. Okay, Forrest Gump, one of the best films ever made. Once Upon a Time in America, The Shawshank Redemption, also one of the best films ever made. The Green Mile, one of the best films ever made. Pulp Fiction, one of the best films ever made. Godfather, oh my gosh. The Dark Knight, one of the best films ever made. Goodfellas. These are all fantastic films. The Pianist, I'm not as crazy about. Apocalypse Now. Does it say how long? 2 hours and 33 minutes. That's technically, according to IMDb, only 1 minute longer than Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice the theatrical cut. Schindler's List, 3 hours and 16 minutes. We've already talked about The Return of the King, which has 1,000 endings. Django Unchained, The Sound of Music. Oh my gosh, The Sound of Music, 2 hours and 54 minutes. One of the greatest films of all time. Inception, 2 hours and 28 minutes. That seems short for Inception, but still making my case for me. Casino, 3 hours and 2 minutes. The Godfather Part 2, most people would say is one of the greatest films of all time. Rebecca's never seen it. Rebecca needs to watch it. 3 hours and 20 minutes. Lawrence of Arabia, 3 hours and 36 minutes. The Departed, I'm pretty sure I fell asleep in the theater, 2 hours and 32 minutes. Gone with the Wind, very, very long, 3 hours and 42 minutes. One of the most epic films of all time. And one of the first big blockbusters in Hollywood cinematic history. So I just wanted to take some time and go through those lists because I just want to debunk right now that the idea that a film with a long runtime and 2.5 hours is like standard fare now. 2.5 hours is no big deal, especially with a lot of those films on the list we looked at that were like 3.5 hours. Now that's a long film. But I just kind of assume when I'm going to sit down in front of a film these days, it's going to be somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours. That's just going to be the average length of a film. And so the idea that the Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice being 2.5 hours, which the Ultimate Edition is 30 more minutes of that, 3 hours, but it's awesome. And it adds so much more to the story when you get that extra 30 minutes because you get to see more of Lex's plan and you get to see more of Clark Kent. You know the Ultimate Edition. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's awesome. But the idea that a long film equals bad film is false. It's just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. We've gone through all those lists to debunk that. I also, since there's a lot of mention of the Marvel movies, and Ann does a fair bit of referencing the Avengers and the Marvel Cinematic Universe in this review specifically, I thought we'd take a look at some of the MCU runtimes to see how long these films are. Let's take a look at them. Let's see what the runtimes are for these films. Iron Man, 2 hours, 6 minutes. Iron Man 2, 2 hours, 4 minutes. Now, those are pretty short compared to BVS, but only by about, 20, 30 minutes. Not that much difference. The Avengers, she mentions the Avengers, 2 hours, 23 minutes. That's what, 9 minutes shorter than Batman v Superman? Am I doing my math correctly? this is not that much shorter. Captain America, the first Avenger, 2 hours, 4 minutes. Iron Man 3, 2 hours, 10 minutes. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, 2 hours, 16 minutes. Guardians of the Galaxy, 2 hours, 1 minute. Avengers Age of Ultron, 2 hours, 21 minutes. Very close to the BBS runtime as well. Captain America Civil War, 2 hours, 27 minutes. Captain America Civil War came out about the same time as Batman v Superman. I haven't read a lot of the Captain America Civil War reviews, but I wonder if they talk about the, what did she say it was? How did she describe it? The punishing 2.5 hours. Would Anne consider Captain America Civil War's runtime as a punishing 2 hours and 27 minutes? Probably not. All right, let's continue on into the MCU. Guardians, these are all over 2 hours, by the way. Some of them getting into 3 hours. These are also the films that happened after BVS, so Anne wouldn't have known these runtimes for these films, but it shows that audiences were willing to, after BVS, and even before BVS. I mean, Titanic came out. We all sat through that like 4-hour film. I don't know why this, again, I don't understand why this is a problem. But these films, this list of films came out after BVS. So just to be fair, I just wanted to put that disclaimer in. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, 2 hours, 16 minutes. Spider-Man Homecoming, 2 hours, 13 minutes. Thor Ragnarok, 2 hours, 10 minutes. Black Panther, 2 hours, 14 minutes. Avengers Infinity War, 2 hours, 29 minutes. Only 3 minutes shorter than Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice theatrical cut. Captain Marvel, 2 hours, 3 minutes. Avengers Endgame, 3 hours and 1 minute. Spider-Man Far From Home, 2 hours and 9 minutes. I have a link to all these runtimes in the video description below. If you think I'm just making it up, you can go and click on it for yourself and see what you think about those the list of those runtimes. So I'm just saying, I'm hoping right now we are thoroughly debunking the runtime thing, because it comes up in almost every single one of these reviews and it drives me bananas. So I just wanted to take some time and really go through that because it's wild to me that keeps coming up. All right. So Anne also describes Batman v Superman as the, quote, the direct opposite of the sprightly, witty, visually vibrant Avengers movies, unquote. And I'm like, is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing to be the opposite of something? Do you want to be exactly like that thing? I don't know. If I'm a filmmaker, I don't want to make a film that's like some other film. She writes that as if it's a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. And I think a lot of people liked the idea. At least I know a lot of people who did love and still love the DCEU, including myself, that really relished in the idea that the DCEU was so different from the MCU. Because quite frankly, I grew out of love with the MCU after Ant-Man. I feel like I talk about it all the time, but Ant-Man was the clincher for me. But those films kind of became formulaic and stale after a while. They had a really good start there in that first phase, and then it just became cookie cutter. Same thing, same movie, same movie, same movie, same movie. And so when the DCEU came around, Man of Steel came around, something different, BVS, something different. And it was really refreshing. And those films were different from the Arrowverse, which was nice. It was nice to have a little variety. So I think it's actually a really good benefit to the film, to BVS, that it's actually the direct opposite of the sprightly, witty, visually vibrant Avengers movies. That's just me, maybe. But I am glad that Anne recognized the good in the performances from Holly Hunter, Gal Gadot, and Diane Lane. I would agree with her. They put in some great performances in the film. Okay, continuing on, quote, strip away the trite character beats, rote plot points, random dream sequences, and other narrative padding, and Batman v Superman comes down to the actors, their characters, and whether they can sustain interest over the long haul. Interest over the long haul. The answer is yes, if they wind up in the hands of filmmakers blessed with authentic imagination rather than serviceable technical chops, unquote. All right, I have a lot of questions here. Anne's not going to be able to answer any of them, but I'm just going to ask them anyway. Trite character beats? Like what? What are the trite character beats? I'd love to know. Rote plot points? Like what? Narrative padding? Like what? Random dream sequences? Random dream sequences? As if those those dream sequences don't have meaning and purpose behind them? Really? You're a film critic. Ah! Okay. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be mean-spirited or, cutting anybody down, but I just to say they're random is so false. They have meaning. Even the dream sequences where, Bruce is dreaming, in the cemetery at his mother's, like, I forget what you call those things, but the place where he sees his mother's name on the, where she's buried, and he, puts his finger into the blood. There's so much meaning behind that. It's all leading you up to the Martha moment and him dealing with the death of his parents, especially with this mother, and how that's going to be impactful for him later on. That's not random. There's meaning behind all of that stuff. Maybe you could maybe make the argument with the nightmare sequence, but even if you didn't know what was coming, you would have, I mean, maybe I'm just assuming that other people have some intelligence, but wouldn't you assume that there was a reason for that? Wouldn't you assume that they were foreshadowing something, that something was coming? Even if you'd never seen Zack Snyder's Justice League, even if you didn't know what was supposed to be coming, even if you didn't know that 5-film arc, even I, watching the film for the first time, was like, "Oh, that must be going somewhere. There must be a reason for that." So why would you say it's random? Like, I don't understand it. Okay. So also, Anne is just a bundle of contradictions to me. I'm having trouble with this review because she'll say something and then she'll say something else, and I'm like, that is contradicting your previous statement. So Anne acknowledges that even with the long runtime that we've taken a long look at, the characters in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice can actually sustain interest over the long haul. So I don't understand why she complained about the the runtime if these characters can sustain her interest, that she was able to be interested in the film even despite the long runtime. I don't understand it. And also, this is quite the statement. Anne believes that the only thing Zack Snyder can offer is serviceable technical chops. Wow. 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 That's all I can think of to say. Because if you would look at Zack Snyder's what he's visually trying to communicate through the film, and you look at Larry Fong's cinematography, it is beautiful. It's beautiful. And I say that as somebody who has experience behind the camera, who would love to be able to say, "I did that. That I shot that." I wish I could be like, you see that Wayne murder at the beginning of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Guess who shot that and how good that looks? I wish that could be me. I wish I could be Larry Fong saying that. Larry Fong gets to live the rest of his life to say, "You see those beautiful shots on that screen? Mm, that was me. That was me." I'm so jealous of Larry Fong that he gets to say that for the rest of his life. He gets to point to that and be like, "Yeah, that's me. That's the good stuff." Whew. And that's because Zack Snyder draws out every single shot that he wants to put on film, that he wants to shoot. He creates those storyboards. Those are his shots, and Larry Fong helped him make those happen on screen. And to say that these people only offer up serviceable technical chops, wow. Wow. I can't imagine watching BBS and saying that about the film and the filmmaking. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I have such a respect for the way that film looks and how beautiful it is and how it tells the storytelling through visuals and doesn't even in a lot of cases need the dialogue or need um you know need to tell you something through exposition. It just tells you through the visuals and the music and the performances, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's a high quality filmmaking. And it's very it I'm speechless that somebody would say this about the work. Um, Serviceable technical chops. Wow. All right, so let's just end this review here. Anne writes, quote, seen through one lens, Batman v Superman embodies the exhaustion of a genre that has long since outlived the ability to invest it with new relevance and meaning. Seen through another, it suggests that the slate is always blank, waiting to be re-inscribed, or better yet, smashed altogether. We can always use another hero. In the meantime, our heroes desperately need new life, not another dirge. Unquote. Exhaustion of a genre. I don't know about anybody else, but by the time the BVS came out, it was completely different than what we had seen in previous superhero films. Even with maybe the closest thing that we would have gotten to BVS was The Dark Knight, in the way it took the storytelling seriously, and it was a beautifully well made film, and it had a great Hans Zimmer score. Come on, the Hans Zimmer Joker theme. How could she have said that about him? It's the coolest. Anyway, so The Dark Knight was probably, before BVS was like the top tier, and it's still one of the top tier superhero, I would say more comic book films. I wouldn't necessarily say superhero. I'd probably label it as a comic book film that I would also put in the drama category. But BVS was a total game changer. It was a game changer because up until then we had, again, Marvel cookie cutter, cookie cutter, cookie cutter, cookie cutter, cookie cutter, and the BVS came and was like, what if we did something different? And so to me, to see BVS connected to the description of the exhaustion of a genre, to me, I think that's completely wrong. I think, if anything, it reignited the genre after the MCU had been so formulaic for so long at that time. So I think that's a really strange thing to write about. And the last thing I'll say about this review, like Dawn of Justice, Anne's review opens and ends with a dirge, which seems fitting for a review that plays like one. All right, so I am going to hop into the chat here to see if there's anything that I need to discuss from the chat, and if there's anything else anybody else says. Let's see. Dennis says Tarantino also has a shoeless feet fetish. Why isn't she up in arms about that? Maybe she is. We haven't read one of her Tarantino reviews. That would be something to look at. Dennis also says this world deserves a better class of film critic. The Joker would also agree. Let's see. And Dennis also says this, Star Wars has a ton of Nazi imagery. Isn't that opportunistic? Yeah, they even have stormtroopers. Call them stormtroopers. So yeah, that's very true. Good point, Dennis. Let's see. I'm trying to look through all these. Everybody's talking about these great films. And Dennis says, fun fact, critics trashed Citizen Kane. Yeah, they also, well, let's see. They've trashed quite a bit of films. It's a Wonderful Life is also a notorious one that they trashed, and it became beloved over time. Also one of the great American films. Citizen Kane is such a good example, because when I watched Citizen Kane for the first time, I was just blown away by the use of light in that film. I've never been to a film class where they talk about Citizen Kane, but I imagine they probably talk about the light in that film, because the use of light is just, oh, it's beautiful. Let's see. David also points out Clockwork Orange was trash too, and Shawshank tanked in the box office. Yeah. Clockwork Orange is a strange film. It is a strange film, but it is a very interesting one that has a lot to say about, like, the mind, and kind of the trying to rewire it a little bit at the end. It's kind of interesting. Some of the stuff I was like, ooh, watching it, but at the end it has a little bit of a kind of a twist that's kind of interesting. So Clockwork Orange, one of the most talked about films in history, and a film that a lot of people discuss, and it hasn't faded away. It's not one of those films that was watched and released and watched and then faded it away. It's still around. People talk about it. Shawshank, one of the best films ever made, tanked at the box office. Who cares about the box office? One of the greatest films. Let's see. Yeah, Dennis wonders about Ann Hornaday's review of Avengers Endgame. I'd be curious. That might be a good exercise to see if she reviewed it and what she thought about that punishing 3-hour runtime. I wonder if she thought that was punishing. Let's see if there's anything else. Let's see. Some talk about Titanic. Let's see. Yeah, Dennis says, "Dream sequences are meaningless. Carl Jung must be spinning in his grave." Yeah, I just the thing that is so perplexing to me about the dream sequences being random is because if you look at the dream sequences and take them in totality. And one of the things I did when I was watching and analyzing BBS for this series, for my Why I Love Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice series, I started to connect all those nightmare sequences and dream sequences and the fact that like characters aren't sleeping and they're calling their mother in the middle of the night, and they're all having these bad dreams, and like that's really juicy material to work with when you're analyzing a film. Like that's interesting, that's thematic, it all goes together. It's connecting these characters on the basis of their dreams and their nightmares and not being able to sleep, and what does that mean? And that's the fun part about watching and analyzing a film, is being able to figure that out. Why is that happening? And to be able to interpret the film is part of the fun of analyzing it. And so I think it's just strange that a reviewer, a film critic, and somebody obviously considered to be an expert in her field, is not seeing those connections. And maybe, to be fair, maybe Anne had only seen it once and she didn't have the time to go back and look at some of these things, because for me, I connected a lot of things on the first viewing, but on the second viewing, I caught all the crosses at the death scene, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then it would take me a couple of other viewings to be like, "Oh, there are crosses in the Day of the Dead sequence. Oh, there are other things there. Oh, in my fourth and fifth viewing, I caught other things." And so, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, I think, is such a dense film in terms of thematic elements and storytelling and visuals, that it takes several viewings for it to really enrich your enjoyment of it, because you can't you it's just impossible to catch all of that stuff in one viewing. So to be fair to Anne, maybe she just saw it once, wrote it off, didn't put any extra effort into it, and didn't care. So, and maybe she just didn't catch these things on the first viewing. But I think BVS is a film that needs to be rewatched, and it needs to be analyzed in terms of the storytelling and the visuals and even the score, and like all of those layers to it are what make it such a great film to me. And so it's unfortunate when you well, I shouldn't say when I read these reviews, it's unfortunate to me that I have the benefit of having rewatched it so many times and have caught all these things, and still catching things. Like I still rewatch it, I'm like, huh, I didn't think about it this way before. And so I have the benefit of having watched it so many times that I do see the value in all of these things. But somebody who's only watched it once and they didn't seem to like it because of what they saw, they wrote off a lot of things and didn't really put a lot of effort into it. So it's unfortunate for people like that, because I think they're missing out. So anyway, so I guess that's going to do it for this week's live stream. And in case you're interested, remember when I said we're going to come back to something at the end? So in case you're interested, Ann Hornaday has written a book. She has written a book about watching movies. And the book is titled Talking Pictures: How to Watch Movies. She is going to teach you how to watch movies. I've put a link to it in the video description below this live stream, this video. And so I don't know. I just thought I would put it out there in case anybody wanted to go read it. Since I did kind of look her up and I saw this book and I thought, wow, that's interesting. Somebody who wrote a review of a film that I don't think she really watched very well wrote a book about how to watch movies. So I don't know. I just personally thought that was pretty funny. But if you're interested in reading the book, I don't think I'm going to give it a read through, just because I have honestly so many books I've got to read before that I really actually want to read. So I don't know that I'll be picking this up, but I'm making it available to anybody who does, if you are interested in it. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that Ann Hornaday wants to share her perspective on how to watch movies. All right. Well, if you missed this live, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. If you ever have any questions about when I'm going to be live, just check this YouTube channel. I usually schedule them in advance, so you'll be able to see those dates. And I'm hoping to be a little more consistent now that I've moved my time a little later to 9 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. So hopefully I can be a little more consistent with that time. And as always, if you do have a BVS review that you'd like to share that you thought was actually well written or made some good points, or you just thought was a great review, comment below in the comment section, and I'll share that review with everybody else in future videos. All right. Well, thanks to everybody who hung out with me and talked films with me today and talked reviews. So I appreciate everybody showing up and hanging out with me. It always enriches my meaning that I find in these reviews and in this film discussion. So I appreciate everybody contributing. All right. Well, I am now going to hand it over to voiceover Rebecca, and she's going to close out this live stream. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at @TheDerbyKid and on Vero at DerbyKid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DCTV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.